Hi everyone, welcome back to our science class. My name is Teacher Yuri, and in today's video we are going to learn something new. In the past two lessons we have talked about the classification of animals. So we have the animals with backbones, which are called the vertebrates, and animals without a backbone, which are called the invertebrates. So in today's video, we are going to learn how to classify plants. Alright, so let's begin. So plants can make their own food. As we have studied before, they can carry out photosynthesis, and they also cannot move from one place to another to look for food. That's why they perform the process called photosynthesis, where they make their own food. Now, just like animals, plants can also be divided into smaller groups. Okay, so plants can be divided into two groups. We have the flowering plants and the non-flowering plants. Alright, so in this video we are going to understand what are the flowering plants and what are non-flowering plants. Okay, so flowering plants. These plants have flowers. Okay, from the word flowers, those colorful, the part of the plant which is colorful, and it also has petals. It has the pollen grains and stuff like that. They are the ones that could develop into fruits with seeds. So basically, the flowers are the ones that develop into fruits that contains the seeds. Now, flowering plants reproduce through their seeds. Their seeds are dispersed by animals, wind, water, or splitting of the fruit. Now, we also have learned this in the past videos, how the seeds are dispersed by animals and how are they dispersed by wind as well and water, or even simply by splitting of the fruit on the tree when it's old and not picked for consumption. Okay, so these are the examples of a flowering plant. So we have the orchid. Okay, so these are very colorful flowers. The daisy plant. We also have the tulip. One common example, for example, we have Ratchabruk, which is the national flower of Thailand. So that is considered as a flowering plant. The rose. Roses are flowering plants, and sunflower. So those are examples, just a few examples of the flowering plants. So basically, these are plants that has flowers, and those flowers eventually develop into being a fruit, and then they also have the seeds inside them, which help them to reproduce. Okay, now let's go to the non-flowering plant. Okay, so a non-flowering plant do not have flowers. Okay, so they do not produce flowers. Okay, so basically because of that they do not have fruits as well. Okay, so examples are conifers, moss, ferns. These are some examples of non-flowering plants. Okay, these plants that do not have flowers. Now, conifers reproduce through seeds, which are held in their cones. Okay, so this is the cone right here in the video, in the picture. You can see that that is the cone, that is not a flower, and inside the cones are the seeds of the conifer. So there are male cones and female cones. So the male cones produce pollen grains, and the female cones contains eggs for the reproduction. So conifers often pollinate their pollen grains by So they rely solely on the wind for them to be able to pollinate and reproduce. After the female cones are fertilized, they fold their scales, releasing the seeds, and the seeds are usually dispersed by the wind. Most conifers, this is an example of a most conifers are evergreen. So this means that their leaves remain green throughout all the 4 seasons. Okay, so the conifers are green even if it's winter, even if it's summer. So they remain green throughout all the 4 seasons. These are examples of conifers. So we have the fir tree and the spruce tree. Another non-flowering plants such as ferns, we have here fern, a picture of a fern. Ferns and mosses reproduce through spores. Okay, so what are spores? So spores are small and light and thus can be dispersed by wind. So on the picture right here, the spores are in this spore sac. Okay, this black dots at the back of the leaf of a fern are called spores. Spores are small and light and they can be dispersed by wind. So the leaves of ferns are called fronds. Okay, so ferns leaf are called fronds. On the underside of fronds are spore sacs that contains the spores. So the dots are the spore sacs and they contain the spores. Ferns can grow on the ground or on trees. So basically they can grow on other living things, on other plants, and they can also grow on the ground. So bird's nest fern growing on a tree is what you can see on the picture right now. Mosses, however, are very tiny plants that usually grow in groups. Okay, so they can carry out photosynthesis. Most mosses live in damp, shady places. So you can find mosses most often in damp places or places that are a little bit wet. Okay, and shady places, which means that they are not easily accessible by sun. So they are not under the sunlight. Okay, so they are in shady places. So this is a moss growing on a log. So basically it grows in a forest, which we know that the forests are actually damp. They are a little bit wet. And mosses have capsules that holds their spores. So they reproduce through their spores, and their spores are not in a spore sac, but they are inside a capsule, like this one on the picture. So that's how they reproduce. Okay, so that is it for today, guys, for both flowering and non-flowering plants. So know that flowering plants are those plants that has flowers, and non-flowering plants are those plants that do not have flowers. So one example of flowering plants are roses, sunflowers, and the like. And also non-flowering plants are ferns, mosses, and conifers. So those are a few examples of them. So let's go to your workbook and let's see if you can answer a few of the questions there. So have a great day, and I hope to see you in the next lesson. Bye!